Traveling the Vortex.
We've joined the Doctors as they travel the Vortex and landed at episode number 33 of Rassilon. I'm Keith of Rassilon.
I'm Shaun of Rassilon.
And I'm Glenn of Rassilon.
Welcome to this week's Traveling the Vortex.
Of Rassilon. How's everybody doing this week?
We amuse ourselves
This
so
is
easily.
our first week recording in our
the
new studio.
And it's been an exhausting weekend. Sean's not very
Well,
tired
you've done a
from
lot
it.
of moving.
Yeah,
I did all the work.
You did all the work. I did absolutely nothing. I sat around and played Borderlands all week, and I felt bad because you kept carrying heavy things past me.
Well, why didn't you carry stuff in for him?
He did help once.
Once.
True story. Funny thing. I told him, I was like, dude, you got to learn the rules of the house because we live on a second floor apartment. And I said, so anytime, and it's not unusual, I would do this with Will, my old roommate, where I would call him and say, dude, I'm in the parking lot. Come help me carry something up. And he'd be like, all right, let me get my shoes on. I said,
So-
anytime you want anything, just text or call, right?
And this is after he's helped bring up a load.
I go down and help him bring up a load of stuff.
We go back to my place, my old place, bring another load with us. I text him, help, a little before we arrive. And then I call him, no answer. So, and this was the biggest pain this was the worst part of the moving process because it was all my clothes. So we just grabbed them off the hangers, or out of the closet, and didn't box them
Still
up.
on the hangers.
Yeah, still on the hangers. Usually that works fine for me, but with only two people, we were both trying to carry too much and ended up dropping a whole bunch of stuff. And Shaun, after saying, hey, just call or text, no answer.
I was in the middle of a heated round of Borderlands with Mel, and it doesn't have a pause function. Because if you pause it, the bad guys can still... If the screen goes bloop, like there's a pause, but they still can come and kill you. And we found that out the hard way last time. And so I was ignoring my phone, not really realizing it was ringing because it was still on silent. But we were playing, and then the door kicked open, and it was Keith and Sarah carrying gifts. And it was like, oh, hi! Did you need help with that? Grumble, grumble, grumble.
No,
walked
got
past.
it on now.
And it wasn't until after that I looked at my phone and went, oh.
Just for the record, I believe if you hit the center X button in the middle,
Tried
bring
that.
up the... It won't.
I didn't think so.
No,
There's still background
Supposedly
noise.
it really? Well, maybe
Yeah.
it is still going, because supposedly it interrupts game play altogether because it has to use the processor to think about that.
That was
in a
my
different
thought,
way.
was that I
Huh,
should be
I'll be
able to
darned.
do that. Because after he came back, I was like, I'm sorry, I can't stop.
That's how I
There's
always
no-
get around the stuff that I can't pause in, because there's some games I think Halo, no, something's like that where if you pause in the middle of the game, they're actually still coming and attacking you. And so I figured out that if you push the actual, what do they call it, the home? It's not the home button.
The X button.
I just
The big giant X in the middle of the controller.
I just set up the Wii tonight. That's got a home button on it.
I don't
But
like
yeah,
the controller on
it's-
that. But yeah, so...
But I am all moved now.
Well, you're all in.
I
guess that's all moved.
I don't have to haul stuff anyplace.
You don't. Yeah, you're nothing's set up quite yet.
I
but-
don't have to go back to that old place at all.
Well, until we rearrange this
Yeah.
living room, and then
Well,
we'll be moving stuff around. But.
That's different. That's rearranging. That's not moving.
Okay.
And funny, and I'd be willing to bet that the majority of our listeners are probably in the same boat. We touched briefly on this off mic last time. What was the first thing you set up when you got here? Anybody care to guess?
The PS3.
And what was the second thing you set up when you got here?
The computer.
And what was the third thing you set up? Wasn't it the bed?
Yeah, I think it was the bed.
The bed.
Yeah, probably the bed.
The bed. These sleeping arrangements come third.
Technically, the bed was set up very first because we brought it in and set it down.
No.
Now, technically,
No.
technically, I didn't even get sheets on the bed until I had unpacked the PS3, set up the computer, a whole bunch of stuff. Later that night, I got sheets for the bed.
I suppose technically the first thing you did was you brought your DVDs over. That was
Yeah,
even
that-
before the PS3 and the computer.
Yeah,
all the DVDs
I brought those
came
over last
so.
week.
Those came over before you moved, though.
Yeah, that was a
Well,
preliminary
and so did
move.
my clothes, and
Yeah.
those went straight up in the hanger. So
Right.
But I just And like I said, I'd be willing to bet the people chuckling out there going, "Yeah, I did the same thing." And I'm not berating him at all because I do the same thing.
I got in trouble for setting up the electronics when we first bought our new house, and we were moving in, and we didn't even have the kids' beds or anything set up yet, and I was setting up electronics, and I'm just wired that way. That's what you do. You set up the entertainment. It's the most important stuff.
Because if you're unpacking
Now,
stuff, you can have stuff going on in the background.
Well, now, so when Holly says, "What are you doing? We don't even have beds together. We don't even have this, that." I used my fallback excuse. I had to find something to do for Caitlin, so setting up the TV was the most logical thing. She bought it. So,
but then she didn't buy when you had to set up the second TV.
No, that's true, because I went downstairs and started setting the second TV, and we only had one kid at that time. So,
well.
So that's our news this week.
That was pretty much it.
New studio location, and
our waveform is apparently bigger, so hopefully we sound better over here.
Hopefully.
I think we have better acoustics. Our living room.
The
than your
air
bedroom.
conditioning fan isn't blowing as hard and a little quieter, so hopefully we don't wake up our neighbors from our loud laughing and having so much fun.
Yeah, screw them. we actually, for the most part, have pretty good neighbors. There's a couple of hillbillies that moved in next door that I'm not happy about. But
sorry to our southern Missouri listeners.
Oh, dude, why you got to go and call it out like that?
I'm just apologizing to our southern Missouri.
That is,
there's
Shaun
dozens of people
and
going to
Glenn.
maps right now. Where is that at? Do I live in that area?
If you can't read the word Ozark, you probably live there.
Oh,
Moving right
That's
along.
Glenn at travelingthevortex.com.
you know, it's funny. I was actually thinking about that just recently because we're on Get Glue now, and you can click on it and it shows the people that I'm listening to or watching Traveling the Vortex, and none of these are people that, with the exception of one or two of them, that we get feedback from or deal with on a regular basis.
It's a nice venue to go to find because there's we joke about our 7 listeners because we get feedback from 7 people frequently, which we love to hear from you guys. Don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of times when you don't get feedback. You feel like you've got such a small audience. So it's nice to go to that venue and say, hey, we actually have people that are listening that don't write in. They just, they're our silent audience that listen diligently every week.
Well, and I thought to myself that
it
may be, just maybe, we haven't done you can
haven't
reach
done the
us at
contact
this
information
in a very, very long time. And since the new site is up, we've kind of shuffled off of that, thinking, it's up
There's
there on
a
the web.
contact page.
There's a contact page. Do some research.
But for those listening through iTunes and don't ever go to our website, you can go
then
there.
shame on you.
At travelingthevortex.com. Shaun and Glenn put a lot of work into that website.
And Matt.
And Matt. I was just meaning content-wise.
Well, content. Yeah. we do all the content work. Where's your content? I'm not
I
really
keep track of feedback.
That's true. You're the feedback keeper.
Yeah, and that's dwindling. So you're gonna have to start. We're gonna have to start shoveling other jobs your way.
Although Moldowitch, we'd love to have you do articles on our website.
Oh yeah, if we can steal you away from the
Time
Time
Meddler?
Meddler blog and come join us, we'd be thrilled.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also want to give a shout out. Speaking of Matt Hodges, who is our technical behind the scenes guru, his birthday is Monday. And I told him I was going to do a huge deal and throw a thing up on the website for him, as I did for you.
Thank
because Keith's birthday was Friday.
you.
Happy birthday, Keith.
Officially, on air. Happy birthday.
August 12th was the date, and August 15th will be Matt's birthday. And technically, as recording this, it already is Matt's birthday.
Oh, that's true. It is after now.
It's after midnight now.
I
Because
was a late one this week.
somebody couldn't be bothered to show up on time.
But we were still
My
waiting
15
on
minutes
Shaun.
as opposed to your hour.
How long am I going to get to rib you about that? Not very often. It doesn't
That's
happen
true.
often. So I told him.
It'll happen more often now that you can just come straight over
you'll
from
never,
here.
Yeah.
you'll never be late.
I'll never be late. I did think it was cool. I didn't realize that you share a birthday with John Nathan Turner. I thought that
didn't
was
know
really
that
cool.
either. That is very cool.
Anyway, Matt's
Before
birthday.
he went crazy.
Matt's birthday on Monday.
Matt's birthday on Monday, so we wanted to throw a shout out to Matt because he's the technical guru that helps us keep all of this afloat.
So,
But back to contact information.
Where can they reach us, Shaun?
Where can they reach us? Well, they can reach us obviously on the web at www.travelingthevortex.com. They can reach us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/travelingthevortex. They can reach us individually through email. I'm Shaun at travelingthevortex.com.
I'm Glenn at travelingthevortex.com.
I'm Keith at travelingthevortex.com. That's EI,
not I-E as I continue to spell it. And I guess Shaun is A-U-N.
And if you want to send feedback in, there is on the website a feedback page, or a contact us page.
But if you're old-fashioned and want to just type it in, it is feedback@travelingthevortex.com.
And our Google Voice number is...
We haven't given that out in a long
I
time.
know.
Oh, yeah,
I was
we
just thinking
haven't
about
had
any voice
voicemail in
feedback.
a long time. 913-890-3025. And, of course, you can find that on our Contact Us page, as well as a form to fill out to send us feedback.
That's really the easy. I find that's really the easiest way because all you have to
Oh,
do
that's
is
the way
remember
Chrissy does it every time.
Yeah, travelingthevortex.com. Then you just click on the feedback button, and there's a form right there. It's so simple. I love it. But if you traditionally like to go through the email route, then those are your options. And
You know something very cool that I just found out this week, which is kind of what spawned this whole we haven't done this in a while?
what's that?
Our Google voicemail number happens to be the spatial coordinates for Castrovalva.
Well, there we go. We were looking for the connection.
Not really. I can't back that up.
Is that why? I was just saying, is that why we haven't gotten any cars for a long time? They're headed out there.
I should have made it Logopolis because you couldn't say it.
No, Castrovalva is the one I have trouble with.
Oh, what is it?
No,
Yeah, it
Logopolis
is.
I have no problem with.
Is it Castrovalva?
Except for when I was a kid, I used to think it was Legopolis, so I thought,
Oh, damn! The joke worked and I
always
blew
pictured
it.
Legos.
Oh well.
Moving right along.
Moving right along.
Well, now, speaking of feedback, let's hear a little bit this week.
We got one from Chrissy.
Hi, Chrissy.
Writing it in
Hi,
at the 11th
Chrissy.
hour. We got it today.
Well, she had to wait till we watched
That's true.
Five Doctors. She joined us on Friday Night Who this week. We watched the Five Doctors and tweeted along. Had a lot of fun.
Did have a lot of fun.
And
Great
Her
fun.
Twitter handle is wildcat_media, and she says, "Hi, Vortex boys. I wasn't going to write in this week, but I just want to let Shaun know that I borrowed time after time from the library and liked it a lot.
Yay!
The only thing I could criticize about it is that disco died for a reason." And she is very right.
It is a product of its time.
Yeah.
I think they should do a reboot. Remake it.
No, it's a good film. You shouldn't remake. Yeah.
We'll
It's
take it out of
That's
disco.
like painting a new Monet or something. You don't do
Oh, come on.
that. No, you don't do that.
You're comparing that to Monet.
What if about a
What didn't compare it to Van Gogh?
What if it was a Van Gogh? Would you be
Yeah,
upset?
No.
I wouldn't be upset then.
Okay, you would.
Anyways, also, just a few things about the Five Doctors. As you probably gathered from my tweets during Friday Night Who, this is one of my favorite Doctor Who stories ever. This was
Ditto.
actually the
Ditto.
very first classic Who I ever watched. Shaun, I know you don't like that term, but I have to differentiate between classic Who and new Who.
Yeah, he forgives us every week, so
At
Yeah,
least
I'm not.
for-
he has to put up with it.
I'm not going to, verbally assault anybody for using the term classic,
unless he's really stressed.
unless I'm the grumpy bear that week.
At least a little bit. Sorry if that causes consternation for you.
You're fine.
The entire thing is just a ton of fun, but the ending sequence at the Tomb of Rassilon is the best.
Okay.
And I love it when the Doctor runs away from being Lord President of Gallifrey and brings the whole story around full circle. To me, the Five Doctors is like going to big family reunions. I love spending time with my cousins and aunts and uncles, but always feel a little bit sad when it's over and everyone starts going home and back to regular life. I guess that's sort of how this special was back in 1983. You had the Fifth Doctor and with Tegan and Turlough, like usual, but then you have 1, 2, and 3 with Sarah Jane, the Brigadier, and Susan, and it's one big party. But by the end of it, we're back down to 5 and his companions. Kind of a nice celebration, and it's sad to see it end, but you had fun anyway. That's my 2 cents. I can't wait for all the Five Doctor stock. Chrissy.
And always we thank you, Christy.
Absolutely.
I think that was a good sentiment for the episode.
It really was.
I never thought about comparing it to a family reunion, but that really, yeah, I could go totally along with that.
I mean, there's a certain element of fanboy that you'd want to complain that, well, Liz Shaw only showed up and ate some potato salad and took off.
Right.
But, there's only so much you can do with.
But there's always family members that are going to do that.
Yeah.
Boy, you've got a rather cold family there, Keith.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
I was double checking the recording.
Okay.
The new setup, we used to have the monitor right in front of us. So,
Yeah.
well, shall we go on to the 5 doctors?
Let's do it. Let's get right into it.
review.
Let's get right into it. I love it.
I am being diminished, whittled away piece by piece. A man is the sum of his memories. You know, a Time Lord, even more so. Someone is taking the Doctor's past selves out of time and space, placing them in a vast wilderness, a battle arena with sinister tower at its center. As the various incarnations of the Doctor join forces, they determine that they are in the death zone in their home world of Gallifrey, fighting Daleks, Cybermen, Yeti, and a devious Time Lord traitor who is using the Doctor and his companions to discover the ancient secrets of Rassilon, the first and most powerful ruler of Gallifrey.
Was that it?
That's it.
No.
There was a lot more text on there, but it's just talking about
You didn't
what...
do the quote justice either. That's one of my favorite parts of it. I have a lot of favorite parts, and I'm going to preface a lot of this story by saying this is one of my favorite parts. So just get used to it right now. But this is one of my favorite parts of this episode. Is that quote by Davison where he's talking when they they're each being plucked out of their different times,
and he's feeling
yeah,
that,
and I love the way he does that. And Davison comes across so brilliantly.
I don't think
it's
anybody but
so well
Davidson
done.
can do it
Could
justice.
do it that way. Yeah, I agree. And
That's how I'm defending myself.
No
one can do it good enough.
It's so well done.
You did give it a bit of a Shatner twist. Not gonna lie.
That was my own take on it. That was my interpretation.
Hey, there's a
few.
future Doctor for you. You want to go older?
William Shatner.
Shatner.
Oh.
Not British. Keith, what'd you think of the 5 Doctors? That's what I'm excited the most to hear about. Now, you obviously I've asked you since.
Yeah.
but-
I really liked it. It was a lot of fun to watch. And really, for me, the highlights again of this episode isn't what you'd expect.
Well, there's a lot of blanket here. Sorry.
It isn't.
I couldn't get it off my feet.
Just as we planned, a tiny net captured you.
Wow. Sorry. I had a blanket on because it's cold in the studio, and there's a lot of blanket there. Go ahead. Sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
It wasn't. Pertwee wasn't my favorite part of the story. It was Troughton. He is so fantastic. When you put him next to all the other Doctors, side by side, you really see how much Troughton shined.
Yeah.
I mean, just his witty comments and the fact that him and Pertwee bickered like crazy was great too.
Well, I think part of that probably, and even coming from your perspective, but at least from mine, is I'm least familiar with Troughton because I've seen the least of his stuff. And that's not due in part with the fact that I haven't gone out there and looked for it. A lot of it is not
Most
available.
of it's not available, yeah.
And so to get a 90-minute dose of, I mean, it's not all Troughton, but a 90-minute episode that has Troughton in it,
And-
quite frequently. Actually, they're all very well balanced, I think.
Oh,
the
yeah, it
Doctors,
really
as
is.
far as their stories and
Well-
what's happening.
4 of the Doctors are well balanced.
Well, yes.
Again,
One is quite overused.
I keep trying to say again because we watched the 3 Doctors before we watched the 5 Doctors,
Yes, which
but
we're not gonna
we
talk about
haven't
until
talked
next
about
week.
the 3
Right,
Doctors.
right.
So if
Well,
I keep
I
saying
think
again,
we
that's
can-
what I'm in reference to.
Yeah, we can allude to, I think, 3 Doctors,
Okay.
but I think we want to save reviewing that for...
yeah.
The 5 Doctors is just cool enough. It is so bow tie. It needs its own show.
And I suppose, Shaun, we should probably explain why we are doing the 5 Doctors out of order with the rest of the multi-Doctor stories. Goes into the same explanation as last week, is we've kind of set up our schedule so that we meet back up with the rest of Series 6. And so what we decided is, as Shaun said, because it's so important to have the 5 Doctors be its own show, we're sort of doing that out
Because
of
there's
turn.
so much to talk about.
Right, and then we'll do all of the other multi-Doctor aired stories next week.
Right.
So that, for anybody that might be confused, that's why we're doing the 5 Doctors this week. And next week we'll be doing the 3 Doctors, the 2 Doctors, and Time Crash.
Correct. Although we do travel the vortex and we skip around anyway.
We do.
So
Yeah, so
And we
it's in the title. My only complaint with this episode
is
is
the
it's-
title.
Not enough Cybermen.
the treatment of the Cybermen.
Oh, come on.
There is Cybermen in it, and I love that. There's more Cybermen than Daleks.
As there should be.
Exactly. And
if the Daleks showed up in this story in more force,
they would dominate the story.
They would dominate the story, as they typically do with
Daleks. They would take over.
I'll buy that.
It would become a Dalek story with multi Doctors in it.
Yeah, that's true.
But the Cybermen...
There's just enough Dalek in this in order to...
It's an anniversary
make
episode.
Now,
you know we could have used a
in fact, the Dalek...
cameo.
Sadly, the one Dalek that's in this is in more than some of the companions that make guest appearances.
Well, yeah.
True.
It's a cameo as opposed to a guest star.
Yes, I agree.
Whereas...
we could have used a lot more of, though.
The Merca.
No, but that would have been kind of cool.
Or had the
Merca come around by the time?
No, this Warriors is right after this, isn't it?
I think you're right. I think Warriors is the kickoff for the next season.
I believe so.
Oh.
So, there was no Merca at that point. No, K9.
Oh, yes, definitely.
It did. It needed more
It would have been
K9 should have
so
come
awesome
along.
with K9.
Well, I watched some of the extras of this, and we'll delve into this as well.
Shortly after we started, I said, well, with the terrain, they couldn't have taken K9.
Yeah, that's right. But interestingly enough, I think Terrence Dix was the one that... I don't think K9 was in this at all, if I remember right from the interviews. And the Dalek, there was no Daleks in this. And it was Terrence Dix who said, no, wait a minute. This is the 20th anniversary episode. You really need this, and this. And one of them was the Dalek, and he wrote the Dalek into it. And, of course, then having to get the blessing from Terry Nation Estate.
Which, that scene was great.
Yeah,
considering
it did well.
It was the first Doctor and Susan running from...
And then K9 was quickly written in because there was a big hole there. Because K9 was such an important part of the...
and such a well-loved.
Fourth Doctor's era. So, yeah.
I mean, who doesn't love K9?
So, those were late ads, and we can thank Terrence Dix for that. So.
It makes you wonder, would K9 have recognized the Doctor in
other forms?
He
recognized David Tennant as the Doctor.
He did.
And called him Master. Yeah, so I would think that...
I would assume that he, for whatever his positronic matrix is keyed into that, where he just recognized him. Or maybe it's just, the loyalty of a dog.
He calls everybody Master?
No, I think just, pets have that. Some pets will go up to anybody.
Sense, yeah.
But some pets are like, no, you're, after however long or whatever, it doesn't matter.
You'll pet me, but you're not the one feeding me.
Exactly. Yeah. Maybe K9's just that. He just knows. Maybe. I don't know.
What else, Keith? I mean, this is.
There's so much to talk about.
This is a romp. I mean, this is a lot of fun. It's a lot of exhibition, but
and it's very
so
different
and done
for
well.
Sitting down watching a classic Who, also.
Well, this is the first time now that we've watched something that would have been omnibus type for us, because this originally aired as I'm saying 90 minutes. Was it 90?
It was 90 minutes.
Yeah. So this was originally aired as a 90-minute. Later split up into episodic format.
But we watched it in a 90-minute format.
So you have been watching everything in episodic format. Now, by that, we sit down and we watch part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5.
Yeah, we watch them all
them all together.
But that break of the commercial, where's the cliffhanger going to be?
Right.
And
this is the first time that you experienced something that Shaun and I did quite frequently in the 80s when they were piecing the Bakers and the Davisons together and making them omnibus editions.
So they would even cut out the credits?
Yeah.
Until the very end?
We would see one long story, and it never felt like a big cliffhanger because it was turned around and resolved in that same scene.
Any cliffhanger moment would be Sarah Jane falling off the scaffolding and then immediately crashing onto the next rung of the ladder. And I mean, it was just a blip in the action as opposed to a big setup moment.
And I think even
Shaun, all of the credits and music and everything was cut out of them.
And I think, maybe misspeaking, I think even you had more episodes of that than I did. You had more omnibus versions than I did, because as we talked, there were a lot more that you remember as omnibus that I remember seeing those initially and then becoming... I mean, I think my PBS... Of course, we lived in different parts of the state, but my PBS was... They changed their format to where they would show them every night as opposed to every Friday, which they did originally. Right. And so then they would do the episodic format.
The first Doctor Who I ever saw was episodic, but I think I was young enough that I really didn't quite cue into what was happening with it. It was just the show that I kind of enjoyed watching. It wasn't until later, when it was on Friday nights, and it was, omnibus editions, that's when I really got heavily into it. And so it was a shock to me to buy a video cassette. Yes. And, an old VHS tape, and pop it in and sit down and watch, and then get credits half an hour in. That was a really...
Wait,
What
I
did
paid
I
how
just?
much? For
yeah,
this?
I just spent 20
It's
bucks
over
on this,
already.
and then it would come up with episode 2, and I was like, oh. I had no concept at that point that that's how those were done because I was so used to the omnibus editions.
Yeah.
This almost felt like a TV movie.
That's
Because-
that's the idea. I think that being an anniversary special, I think that's what they kind of were going for. Was more of a TV movie feel, a telemovie feel, and epic in scope too. All episodes of Doctor Who have the same, somewhat formula,
Oh yeah.
and this one still follows a formula, but this one has just more of an edge. And obviously, you do that for a 20th anniversary. You go a little over the top. You push, your budgets. You push your.
You jam as much in it
Exactly,
as you can.
exactly. As much exhibition in it as possible, but it doesn't ever go overboard with the exhibition. It doesn't do things, with the exception of maybe a few places. Yeah, it doesn't do things solely for exhibition because this is an anniversary episode. It all makes sense to the plot and works really well.
And the plot is fantastic in it. Even though I may have tweeted out, this is jumping to the end of the episode, that all of this was so the president can stay president forever.
Yeah,
but
it sounds like a master motive.
it does sound like
That's
a
what
master
I like
motive.
about it, too.
And it's... Look at Star Wars. This is... I'm not trying to compare what comes in the future, but what comes from the past. But Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, all of this, everything is done so the Emperor can take over and become the Emperor and be in charge.
Politics.
Yeah, it's all politics. And that's one of the things I really liked about this, was that it boiled down to politics. Somebody wanted power.
I think what this does for us too is it shows the corruption within Gallifrey.
Yeah.
within the political structure.
The fact that they turn to the Master for help, and they tell him, "You're one evil guy, but we need you."
Yeah.
And then the fact that Pertwee didn't believe that the Master was actually
I
trying
like
to help,
yeah.
that was great.
Well, twice he tried to convince a doctor that he was there to help him, and got pretty much stonewalled both times, until the Cybermen come along and Davison the Fifth Doctor ends up getting back to the Citadel.
Yeah.
And I think at that point, when it's too late, realizes, oh yeah, the Master was there helping.
Which I have to say, I was a little disappointed that Davidson got back to the Citadel and didn't really get the interaction with Pertwee and Troughton as much as he did with the guy who took Hartnell's place.
Herndl. Richard
Herndl.
Not William Herndl. Richard
William,
Herndl, which
yeah,
I need to
Richard
correct the
Herndl.
website post
Oh, do you
because
have William on
I
there?
have William on there.
I have to say, I liked his portrayal of the First Doctor. I think he did William Hartnell great justice.
Yeah.
There
I
are
used to
times where
think
I
that.
waver on that.
Yeah,
I'll watch it one time and go, man, he just does a spot on Hartnell. And then I'll come back and watch it the next time and go, not
Maybe
so
because
much.
it's been a while
And then I'll
since
come
I've
back
seen
and watch
a
it again
Hartnell.
and just really like it
I
again.
think when I watch it, early on when I first started seeing this, and obviously when I was a kid, when I saw this, I hadn't seen any Hartnell.
That's
I had,
Hartnell.
I had nothing
That's
to
the First
I had
Doctor.
nothing to relate it to. And later, when I started seeing some Hartnell, I thought, oh yeah, this this was the perfect casting. I think he looks like him. I think he's got a lot of the
think he
mannerisms down. He's got a lot of that. The more I've watched it, and the more Hartnell I've seen, the less I feel he is Hartnell. In fact, he actually justifies my feeling on this in one of the specials that they have on the disc, where he talks about how he didn't go back and study any of the Hartnell. He didn't.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he didn't. He didn't look at any. Didn't use any reference. He just came on and made it his own. And they said that he didn't deviate from the spirit of the First Doctor enough that it still works.
Yeah.
And I would agree. I don't think Herndl did anything to deviate from the spirit of the First Doctor.
And that means
But
the writer
he's-
did a good job of writing it.
Yes, and I think that's probably where it lies, is that
Yeah.
Terrence Dicks knew how to write the First Doctor, even though I'm sure he never wrote for the First Doctor. But I'm sure he's written novels and whatnot. Novels that he's
Terrence
written a
I
lot.
want to say...
He may have.
He
I don't
may
know.
have. I know for sure that there are
He could have at least gone back and watched
teleplays or episodes of Troughton's era
Yes.
that he wrote
Yes,
for.
I believe that's
want to
correct.
say there may be one or two that he did of Hartnell.
I believe that's correct. But that being said, I think it's in the writing, because the more I watch, the less Hartnell he seems to me. But again, still embodies the spirit and the idea of the First Doctor, and it doesn't take anything away from the story, and it doesn't take me out of the story by saying, well, that's not the First Doctor. It's just not working for me. It does. It works very well, and I have no problem with the recast.
Yeah. Which, okay, now that brings us to an interesting point. What are your guys' feelings? And I'm just throwing out just out of curiosity. We talked last week or the week prior about possibly doing a Forrest Gump with using existing Doctor footage to insert these older Doctors who are no longer with us into some sort of 50th anniversary special. What are your thoughts on recasting? It's a touchy subject from fans. I know that I flew into an absolute rage at the very concept of them recasting my Star Trek crew for the new movie. I was against it. I didn't want to see it. I don't care about a Starfleet Academy movie, yada, yada, yada. And then I watched it and I loved it. It was really well done. I thought, again, Chris Pine does not do Shatner, but Chris Pine does Kirk. He does a very good Kirk, and he embodies the spirit of what that character should be while not completely caricaturing it. And then there are other people. Keith Urban, I think, did a fantastic DeForest Kelley.
Oh, yeah.
he just nailed it.
Well,
so I think it goes both ways.
Spock, I think, does embody
Zachary Quinto, yeah.
He did a pretty good job, and
he does Spock and Leonard Nimoy. I mean,
he really does.
And Simon Pegg did a fantastic Scotty.
Now, see, that's where I think
I have to disagree with
that's
you on
the
that. I
most
love Simon
different.
Pegg.
That is the most different
maybe
characterization of a character. Now,
maybe I
that
just liked
being
his
said,
take on
I liked Simon Pegg's take on Scotty. I absolutely did, but it was maybe a Scotty that was a lot younger and more reckless. I mean, Scotty was young and reckless anyway in the beginning, but.
Well, I got the impression that he was younger.
But he took a different take on it, or Uhura would be the other one that I think was
that was also
quite a different take. Yeah, it was quite a different take on Nichelle Nichols.
But having said that,
role.
Are we thinking that? I mean, we seem to be pretty okay with Richard Herndl's portrayal of the First Doctor. Again, he wasn't doing William Hartnell, but he was doing the First Doctor. Would you be okay or conceptualize a different actor stepping in for John Pertwee as the Third Doctor, or Patrick Troughton as the Second, in some sort of multi-Doctor arc?
I think if they look similar, I might be okay with it. It just depends on their portrayal. I mean, if you compare the pictures of the quote-unquote new cast of Star Trek and the old cast, physically they look fairly similar.
Yes.
If they can find somebody that looks fairly similar to Pertwee and that can pay respect to Pertwee, I'd be okay with it. But I'd rather see them input new Doctors into old footage.
Yeah, I would much rather, if it's possible and it can be done well, I'd be interested to see. Unfortunately, the problem with that concept is that you have to do it in a way where the Doctors revisit a situation that's already happened. Because if you're using old scenes in a new episode, it's old scenes we've already seen in a different context. So the problem I have with that is it has to be them going back to that and the one particular Doctor or two particular Doctors that they're using not being aware that the others are there, so that things progress in the normal sense, as in trials and
tribulations.
Thank you, tribulations.
Although that one cheated because it actually used clips from two different episodes of the original series out of context to make
you're absolutely right. They did make it.
Now, it was just a little snippet of Mirror Mirror at the end of that.
But it works.
It
works. And so I think that... But my problem with that is that's already been done. And I want him to come... recasting...
You know what? I think we're going to get a multi-Doctor story and not know it.
I think we're going to get a multi-Doctor story, and I think we're just going to get the surviving Doctors is what we're going to do. Which is, interestingly enough, I mean, if you brought back everybody with the exception of... Now, I noticed just recently, watching Time Crash recently, Peter Davison looks a lot older now that I've watched a young Peter Davison. But when I watched Time Crash, I hadn't seen a Peter Davison most recently, and so Peter Davison didn't seem as old as he did when we watched last night.
Because we actually followed it up after we got done with the Five Doctors. So, we were like, okay, it's time for Keith to watch Time Crash.
But the person that has changed and aged the most is Colin Baker. Even Tom Baker, even though he's got the white hair and it's a lot shorter now,
Tom
Tom Baker still looks like Tom Baker.
Tom Baker.
Colin Baker does not look like his younger self.
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't
at
look
all.
much at all like his younger self. And so that would be a little different. And how you'd have to, work it so that would. I don't know.
But
I just trust that whichever way they do it, I hope that they do it right. I mean, I could go with you. One thing that I think, other than the fact that he's a lot taller than his dad, you haven't seen Midnight yet, but Patrick Troughton's son, and I can't remember his first name.
Is it David?
I want to say Andrew.
I think it is. It might be David Troughton. Anyway, he's in that. He looks, if he's not wearing his glasses, looks a lot like his dad in the face, a lot like him. Now he's a bit stockier, and I think he's a lot taller than his dad was.
And they hobbitize him.
But if you put if you put the wig on him, I think you would have the spit. But then, do you do that for? I mean, does that make sense to do that? Is that like putting Julian for years? I'm a huge Beatles fan, and for years Beatles fans said, "Oh, we need a reunion of the Beatles. We'll put them all back on the stage. We'll get them all back together." And Julian sets in for his dad because he looks and sounds a lot like him. And the Beatles always said, "Well, that's not fair to Julian because we wouldn't want to put him through something like that."
No.
So they always said it was a bad idea, and there were a lot of fans that were split on that and said, yeah, they should do that. A lot of us said no, and I was one of those ones saying, no, don't do that. Just have the three come back. But anyway, so I don't know.
If I'm not
might be really
mistaken, though,
wishy-washy
yeah.
here, but I don't know.
You are. For you, this is very wishy-washy.
Yeah, I don't know which way I would go. Yeah, I'm very opinionated on things when I have principle on them, but I don't know on that.
If I'm not mistaken, Troughton's son plays the second Doctor in some of the Big Finish audio stuff
I've heard
recently,
that he has
doesn't
read some audio, yeah. Well, somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think he's actually playing the Doctor. I think what he's doing is he's reading stories. I think what he's doing is he's doing novel readings, but
Has there?
I don't
There hasn't
know.
been any Big Finish second Doctor.
I know he's
there has
done
been-
something with
there's
Big
been
Finish,
some-
but I don't know what it is.
There's been some with Second Doctor content, but I think it's all been like
Companion.
Well, no, it's been story. There's a difference. It's like reading a Doctor Who audio novel as opposed to a radio play.
Yeah.
A radio play is meant to be done as though it were being done on stage or on film, and you fill in. It's acted in such a way with their voices that you can visualize it as we're going along.
And sound effects.
Right.
And music.
A reading of a book, essentially, or a reading of a story, is one person doing all of the characters. Sometimes they'll bring other people in to read, but you're also reading the things like,
the action sequence.
Yes, the action, and you're filling
the
in
narration.
and that's what I think he has done. I don't know. I'm speaking way out of context, or not context, on authority on that because I don't know, but that's what I have heard. So I don't know.
It's a really tough one because I agree with you. I kind of fall on both sides, but I'd like to see. I think if done properly, I'd be okay with the potential of somebody maybe being recast. Because I would prefer that to they got stuck in the vortex. It's like,
well, I think Stephen Moffat could explain a good reason why those other people.
Well, and even if you did it where it was just surviving doctors and didn't reference the other, just they weren't available. They're not part of this story. That would be okay.
That's the way I think it should.
It feels too much like a cheat to say we're going to do this. We're going to bring all the doctors in, but then not really do it.
Right.
Yeah,
you know?
okay,
Like the 5 Doctors, as a matter of fact.
Well, yeah.
We're getting way off topic.
Well, no, I don't think we are. But
I think we are. Even if they bring back the surviving doctors, it wouldn't surprise me if Stephen Moffat does a more multi-doctor than we think he will, and introduces the 12th Doctor.
oh, going forward,
Yeah, I think that would be really interesting.
I wonder if he knows yet.
I don't know.
The only reason I mention this, and I don't think it's off topic per se, is the inclusion of Tom Baker. Which, if we're going to talk about, or the exclusion of Tom Baker, if we're going to talk about the 5 Doctors,
that's the only thing I don't like about the 5 Doctors.
Yeah, I had some complaints about that too.
Now, for a long time, as a child, as a Tom Baker, he's my doctor, 5 Doctors is coming out. The 5 Doctors. You take that at face value.
Yeah.
All 5 of them.
Oh, yeah.
Right! And then I watched it.
Well, we
And
even
he's there
kind
and
of learned
gone.
that about the 3 Doctors.
And I hadn't seen that one, actually.
Well,
at the time that this one aired, I
yeah.
hadn't seen the Three Doctors yet.
But you get, even though you get
You get
the
more-
first Doctor on a TV monitor the whole time.
You get more
He's still,
than...
he's still
Yeah.
there. Now, the reason behind that is because he had
I know he was
injured
ill,
himself.
yeah.
And they actually went to his house and shot all that in the garage. Is what they did, and entered it in, or inserted it into the episode. But anyway, go ahead.
But it felt like such a cheat. Because there he was, and he's punting, and he's got Romana, and he's being witty and funny, and the trapezoid grabs him, which I'll get into later.
It didn't Friday.
It did not. Right.
The Phantom Zone comes down and nabs him and flies off, and then he's an image on a monitor, and he's stuck. And it's like, seriously? And I kept waiting. When's he coming out? When's he coming out? When's he coming out? And then they make reference to it. Well, that one's stuck in the vortex.
And he never comes out.
And he never comes out until the end of the story. And it felt like such a cheat. Such a missed opportunity. Why? All right, so there have been varying stories, behind the... And Glenn's probably more of an expert on the reasoning for this. But the bottom line is that Tom kind of last minute decided that he didn't want to completely overshadow Davison.
No, it wasn't that. It was his
Davidson was going to overshadow Baker.
Yeah, he
Oh, is that it?
He thought that he was, king stuff. Get back over here. He thought he was king stuff, and he was on board because I think his ego had sort of subsided for a week, and he was on board and was fine and was going to do it. And I think it was like even a week out or 2 weeks out, and decided, no, I'm not going to do it. Or even it was a few days, and they had to rewrite it. But he had spent so much time as the Doctor that he felt that if he was in this, he would be overshadowed by others, and that because people held him in such esteem and as iconic, he was the Doctor, that he didn't want to be...
He was too good for that?
Yeah, upstaged by anybody else.
Wow. See, that's disappointing to hear.
Very disappointing.
I mean, and obviously...
Especially when it's your Doctor.
Well,
That's
especially when
what-
it's
yeah.
your Doctor. I mean,
But
with,
I've seen so
with
many
any of them...
behind-the-scene things with, even from his own words, from his own mouth.
Yeah.
He was just an ASS.
He was a donkey.
I've heard it so many different tales of why.
Well,
And
there are a
you
lot out
want
there,
to
yeah.
believe that it's
There are a lot out
I've
there.
done this for 7 years, I'm not ready to come back to it.
Yes.
That's the version I'd like to believe
That's
is
the
true.
version I would like to believe.
I obviously it isn't, but
Well, and ironically
well,
enough,
probably isn't.
with that same year, he appeared at the big 20th anniversary celebrations that they had, alongside all the other Doctors. Now, what would happen would be they would have the four of them in one tent doing signings and and Baker required that he be in another area doing his own thing. And at one point during the show or during the weekend when they had this big celebration, he did show up on stage with them. So you did have the five of them on stage together at one time for the big 20th, ceremony section. But nearly the rest of the time he was isolated from the other four.
So he doesn't feel this way about it now, right?
I would like to think no, since he's coming back and doing big Finish audio.
I think it depends on the week. I really do. The man is very manic. The man is very up and down. You'll watch behind the scenes on these Doctor Who's, and I don't want to get into this too much, but since we're talking about Baker and his
Absence.
his attitude, you'll watch. In some of them, he'll be even commentaries. He'll be so warm and memorable, and he'll remember things and have good things to say about people, and then you'll turn around and watch another one, and he'll be this total bear that you could tell nobody wanted to be around. They don't even want to be around with him recording the commentaries for this and interviews for these things that they've only done in the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, he's so night and day. He's so hot and cold whenever you see him on things. He's a bizarre man, and it really depends. That's why I say it depends on the week. I'm sure it depends on whether this week he likes Doctor Who. The next week he doesn't. That's just that's the impression I get from watching all these things. But I'm sorry, we're digressing.
Well, and the reason that I brought all this up and started this discussion in the first place,
There is a central point.
There's a
Shaun
point to
keeps
this.
trying to bring us back to.
there was a very nice article in, I honestly don't remember now if it was the Doctor Who magazine or if it was the Doctor Who Insider, I want to say it was the magazine, where they did a comparison between...
That would have been the magazine.
That was the magazine, okay. Between Tom Baker and Patrick Troughton as most influential. Now, on the surface, it's one of those silly things that you're like, yeah, right, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Right now with Matt Smith, Patrick Troughton.
Well, that's kind of one of the arguments that this article made was, because when you just say influential, my brain automatically defaults to Tom Baker because he was there for so long. He was so instrumental in the popularity of the show coming on in America at the time that it did. He was during that time frame, so that just kind of gets laid at his doorstep that he was instrumental in the rise of popularity of the show. But the magazine article made several comparisons and really made a case for Troughton's doctor. As for the number of things that were introduced in his era, including jelly babies, which had always been associated, in my mind, that was a Tom Baker thing. It wasn't. It was a Patrick Troughton thing.
Well, even in this, Patrick Troughton pulled out a bag of jelly babies.
I mean, he's had them.
And I think that was a deliberate thing to give Troughton the jelly babies in this because that was his thing. He was the first doctor to do the jelly babies.
But there were so many things, and then the guy mentioned the 5 doctors, and he says, if for no other reason, here's the argument for Troughton. Tom couldn't be bothered to show up. He didn't want to come.
And
Troughton shows up.
Troughton?
Troughton shows up and blows the doors off of this thing. You talked about how much you like him. And I'm the same way. The more I see of Troughton, the more impressed I am, the more depressed I am that there's not more of his stuff available.
Yeah.
Let me add to that.
I think the writer for this and 3 Doctors was so much more in tune with Troughton's character.
Well, I think you have to be
than the original writers for what I've seen of his stories. They got his character more.
Yeah.
One of the other reasons that Troughton would be considered one of the most influential is we had a show that had this crotchety old man traveling the universe in time with companions and barely learned that he was an alien from a different planet or anything. And after 4 years, or 3 years, 4 seasons. 4 seasons?
4 seasons. 3 years, 4 seasons. However that worked.
Right, yeah. Hartnell decides he's done. And so what do they have to do? They have to come up with a clever way to replace the Doctor. What do? They bring Patrick Troughton in. That would have been a make it or break it season.
Oh,
and because of the way that Troughton reinvents the character, because you're taking this opportunity of a regeneration and you're just running with it, and for him to be able to completely turn 180 degrees in another direction from Hartnell and still keep the viewership, that's what is a testament. He's the first one to do that. And that's what makes him an influential actor.
That is a really good point for him.
Sorry. Got off on a tangent there again. There's going to be a lot of these. Circling back to the 5 Doctors.
We don't do that.
Tangents? What are those?
It's a tangent.
There's so many moments in this story that work, that are good, that, like you mentioned, it was very well balanced. Everybody got something to do. Everybody had something that worked in their favor.
Everyone had a partner to do whatever that was.
They're paired up very well. Yeah. Even when we start shuffling partners, like the First Doctor and Tegan.
Which was a great pairing.
Yes. It was. It was a lot of fun to see that.
It was fun. I liked that. It was nice to get Tegan out of the comfort.
And I was waiting for the comment for her to make when she's like, "Come on, Doc," and he's shuffling along. Well, of course I can make it. And kindly stop referring to me as Doc. And I waited for you to just go off because of your dislike of Ace calling the 7th Doctor Professor.
Doc is more,
and you were very quiet. It surprised me.
Doc is more. If Ace called the Doctor Doc, I would be okay with that because it's more like a nickname based off of Doc as opposed to something completely different.
Well, there's only 1 degree different in professorship, so a PhD.
Depending on how you view Doctor, a professor and a doctor are 2 completely different things.
There's only 1 degree of separation.
I think you're so off base with that argument.
You are, yeah.
If you're looking at the structure for degrees, if you're looking at professions.
Anyway.
No, because, I'm going to stop you right there. The only reason you're saying that is because when you think of doctor, you think of medical doctor.
I do.
But there's a plethora of different doctoral degrees out there that have nothing to do. In fact, our good friend Dr. Phil
Well, yeah.
is obviously has a doctorate in music, so doctoral degree.
I have a doctorate in BS.
But the doctor is
I
the
believe
doctor, and just calling the doctor Doc is a shortened version of
We'll revisit
doctor.
that when we get to the trilogy, I'm sure.
And professor is almost insulting because the doctor,
No.
in theory,
No.
went to the next level and got his doctorate. He didn't
No,
just
no.
It's the other way around.
It's the
Is
other way
it?
around.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. A PhD is a step higher. That's what I'm saying. There's a degree difference. It's
Although on
almost
Ga-
like she's promoted him.
Although on Gallifrey, who knows?
Yeah.
Which was another nice bit, is getting more Gallifrey, getting to see more Gallifrey, although they had rocks on the stairs, which I didn't understand.
And they didn't
Well,
wear the
very
proper
little of the
headdresses,
Citadel in
but-
the city, though. They,
Oh, yeah, it
we
was
almost
very,
get like
very...
3 locations.
Three
and that's
locations
pretty much
within. Well, I mean, the
Well,
Death
more
Zone,
than we did
obviously,
the
but
Well,
did on the 3.
I think you have to think of the Death Zone as a different.
That's a different
when
locale.
when I say Citadel, I mean the place of the bubble where
We didn't visit the Panopticon. We didn't
No,
visit the
right.
stuff that has been seen before. We got the...
A new
It wasn't even the president's office. It was... Because we had seen that, although he
Mm-hmm.
hasn't. But it was like a conference
Yeah,
room.
we did kind of skip over Invasion of Time.
I feel bad about that, too, because I really wanted you
I
to see
thought
Invasion
we'll
of
get
Time
there.
to kind
We'll
of
get
set
there.
up some more of the politics.
You'll
but
put it'll put it in perspective.
we'll get there. But I always felt bad that, kind of like you said, Peter Davison comes along and kind of gets shuffled off to Gallifrey, and he's stuck there while everybody else
Well-
is having fun in the Death Zone.
We get the 3 Doctors 2.0.
Yeah, really. It really feels that way at times. And I don't know if the addition of Tom Baker would have made that balance different, or if it still would have
Well, I think
necessitated
it
the
would
plot
have.
to go
and,
that way.
And I wonder how much. I think I had heard that Sarah Jane would have been paired with the 4th Doctor.
I wonder if they would have brought
Had he
Zoe
been-
fully back or Jamie fully
Well,
back for
that's a
Troughton
good question
and
because
put
that
the brig
because
with
that's
Pertwee.
exactly that was what was interesting to me is when I saw this is it's weird to see the 2nd Doctor and the brig together so much because even though they shared their time together
They were
they worked together.
the 2nd
But
Doctor
the brig
introduced them.
and the 3rd Doctor are really what the pairing that you associate with. You don't associate Sarah so much with the same way with the 3rd Doctor as you do with her with the 4th. And so just taking the companions and sliding them back one notch, even though they know them and they worked with them, it's not their original pairings that you really feel most comfortable with. I think.
I felt that way at first, and then I saw how the
but
characters interacted,
yeah, and
then it's so
that's another
fantastic.
thing that works so
and
well.
I
is
can
you don't-
justify it in my mind of okay, these are the Doctors they were very first introduced to
Yeah,
us with.
absolutely.
So I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
It's
I love Troughton and the brig together.
that actually I
Wonderful
think is...
chemistry.
Sarah and Pertwee together.
I think honestly that
Wonderful
Nicholas Courtney and Patrick Troughton work together better than Pertwee and Elizabeth Sladen do, and the reasoning for that I think is when the Doctor shows up at the brig and he's retiring, there's moments of genuine warmth in that. Oh, it's you. Yeah, I'm not really supposed to be here, but I couldn't miss it. Blah blah blah. I mean, they just click. And the brig is defending him to these other guys. He's so strange. Oh,
Yes.
you've rearranged
Love
the
that.
office. I don't like it. And
Love
the brig's apologizing for him, shuffling him out of the office and getting out of the way.
Love that.
Oh, and even in 3 Doctors, Nicholas Courtney and Troughton's interactions were fantastic.
And I think the difference is that the brig and the 3rd Doctor spent so much time together, but so much of it was in...
Contentious.
Yeah, it was a state of conflict between
Yes.
them. Not that they didn't...
against the 3rd Doctor's
Not that they
will.
didn't respect each other.
Well, not that
but-
they didn't respect each other, not that they didn't even like each other, but just that they came at problems from 2 different polar opposite viewpoints
Agreed.
of how things should be done. And I think if you'd had the brig paired up with John Pertwee's Doctor, it would have made a very, very different
dynamic.
for even though he spends most of the time arguing with Patrick Troughton's Doctor.
But in a different way.
But in a different way.
It's
It's
not.
bickering.
It's not a
It's not-
difference of. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
not a difference of goal or opinion. It's
Or
just.
moral.
It's little. Yeah. It's just little like nitpicky things about what's going on, and it's because they're both stressed of the situation that they're in.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that... And I think the Sarah Jane John Pertwee's Doctor doesn't work quite as well, I think, because at this stage in her character, Sarah Jane has, despite the white boots, purple overcoat ensemble that they've put her in, she's grown up a little bit.
Evolved, yeah.
And she has evolved as a character. And so putting her back with a throwback to her original Doctor
See, but I think she
Almost doesn't
still
work.
retains
almost
some
doesn't
of
work.
that
Now,
character.
it does, and it's a tribute to the actors involved that they can fall back into these roles, and the tongue-in-cheek way that it's played with. It's you before you became all teeth and curls. Well, maybe I will, but I haven't yet. It's again, it comes back to the writing and how good Terrence Dicks put this together, that they can overcome. Those two pieces don't really fit together, and then you get something like Tegan and Richard Herndl's first Doctor, which doesn't work at all, and it's just for fun that that they're put out there.
Yeah. Which should we talk about the I guess problem that happens in this episode of that's one of you brought up during the school reunion episode?
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, Glenn, if we're talking about the same thing, I think we are. Glenn retconned that very nicely for me. Maybe not. What are we talking about?
Well, we're talking
Well,
about
the fact that Sarah Jane comes back and meets the Doctor again.
The fourth Doctor just basically leaves her without a how do you do. I mean, she's gone. And
Okay.
And she throws that back in his face later in school reunion, which almost makes a lot of people feel like they just totally omitted the events of the Five Doctors. But I've always contended that she wouldn't have made a comment at that time because she's cognizant enough of time travel that she understands that the third Doctor did not leave her.
Yes.
The only way he left her was in the fact that he died and regenerated and became another version of himself. She spent all of her time in that episode with him. That
It
she's
hadn't
basically
happened to him
right.
yet.
She's basically revisiting her time with the third Doctor, her experiences with the third Doctor, and who that personality was. He doesn't know what's going to happen to her, what he's going to do to her later. So there's no reason. Now
She can't blame him for the events that are going to happen
And
down
the
the road.
only interaction she has is with the fifth Doctor at the very end, after all of that's resolved and they're getting ready to leave, and she says her goodbyes.
Yeah.
But this is a Doctor that she hasn't familiarized herself with like she does with 10 later, because when she reunites with 10, she gets they have the nice little just the moment, and then it's later that she really lambasts him. If she had had that moment with 5, she would have done the same. She'd have taken that opportunity then. She doesn't have the chance because then her and the third Doctor are whisked into the TARDIS and sent back to their respective times. So I've never had a problem with that working, and I think that retcons it just fine.
I think
so,
it made sense to me.
Now, if anybody out there has another opinion of that and thinks that it still doesn't work, we'd love to hear from you. Feedback at travelingthevortex.com or go to www.travelingthevortex.com and click on the Contact Us link. That work for you, Shaun?
It does.
2 references in one episode.
I feel this is going to be a kind of a nitpicky thing because I'm with you. There's so much about this that I like. I love the Rassilon warrior robot.
That's my that's my favorite. One of my favorite Dr. Cabasari.
Even though it's such a simple. I mean, it's a guy in a bodysuit. It's a Power Ranger.
It's a guy.
And this is the first and last time we ever see the Rassilon warrior robot.
And that's it. But it was so cool. I mean, that it had... my brother and I we watched this, and when we would run around and not necessarily play at Doctor Who, but anything, we always managed to incorporate some really cool android that could move like lightning into our play battles. We danced around like ballerinas on the playground, and you had to make the noise when you did it. Stuff like that is awesome. The Cybermen getting... just
annihilated.
I can't come up with a term strong enough to describe what happens to these guys. Not only by the robot, but by the checkerboard inside the tower.
That's another shining moment of this
Master
this
and
and just one after another. These things are like
they're set up to be
not so much.
Yeah. I love the fact that the Rassilon robot is the single one thing that takes down all of the Cybermen, because throughout this story, with the exception of the Master, who doesn't seem... I mean, he ends up, smooth talking his way into with the Cybermen because things aren't working.
Because the Doctor up and leaves
They
him.
seem to be the most up until a point, they seem to be the most dangerous adversary that they're having to deal with in the Dead Zone. Or the, it's not the, we can't keep calling it Dead Zone. Death Zone. Dead Zone, that would be a Stephen King reference.
But there is a dark tower.
Yes, and there is a dark tower. In the Death Zone, and they seem to be the thing that everybody's worried the most about. And then to have the one single robot, I mean, that's what makes that robot even more impressive, is the fact that he totally annihilates that one group of Cybermen.
I do think some of the eliminations, I'm air quotes there, of the Cybermen they weren't eliminations. They took off an arm. Okay, the Cybermen can still keep coming. That's part of the thing of the Cybermen.
Well, but if you watch, it's not just the first shot took off the arm, but then he's got the spears, but then he's got the disc things that he's throwing as well. So the first one would take off an arm, and then he was immediately.
I mean, you're still only seeing about 7 Cybermen, but you see lots of parts fly.
Yeah,
so I think that's the idea.
And then one dude's head melts.
That
was cool.
That was impressive. The very first dude.
Let's go into the inside when we're talking about that grid, that checkerboard grid that I thought was a clever idea. Very simply done, but makes it sound very impressive.
Yeah.
Very, very well written. Now, granted, the Cybermen kind of lumber onto there a little too soon, and even the last 2 are still walking into it as the other ones are being fried. That is a problem. That's a directorial or actor issue there. Yeah. But I really do believe that the Cybermen could have been duped in that way, because the Cybermen aren't the most bright of adversaries. They're not dumb, and they do have strategic plans. But I can see the Master pulling a
tricking them.
Yeah, pulling a fast one on him and doing something like that. And I like that. And I like the concept of how you get across the board. While they don't go into depth, and I don't ever expect me to understand the equation to go through. The fact that there's an equation there, and the fact that the Master and the Doctor both understand the equation, I'm fine with that. And I think that's very clever. And I've always liked that part. I've always liked that scene. I've always liked that. And I think Anthony Ainley shines there as the Master.
Oh,
there.
yeah.
Anthony Ainley is just phenomenal
he comes
in this
across,
entire...
He really is.
Yeah.
With the exception when he's running and things are exploding around him, and he's kind of running like Patrick Troughton did in the invasion.
Okay, now, that's a problem I'm going to bring up is the Death Zone. Full of traps, full of problems, full of this. Not really.
No.
It's a rock quarry.
It is.
We have thunderbolts, but they only show up twice.
Yeah, a couple times.
Once and always around the Master for some reason. None of the other Doctors encounter thunderbolts at all. In fact, Tegan and Doc have a very pleasant walk all the way to the tower.
Can I speak to that though? And maybe this will retcon it for you as well. Maybe it doesn't. I don't even have to retcon it. Maybe this.
Deleted
maybe
scenes?
it explains. No, maybe it explains. No, maybe it explains itself within the episode. You get the impression from all of the Doctors, at least the first 3 talking about the Death Zone, that it's very mythic. That they don't know a lot about this. That there's probably more myth to it and legend to it than what anybody really knows, because no one's been allowed to go there for years. They talk about how even before the time of the Time Lords, people that occupied Gallifrey at the time used to use the Death Zone as games, and they dump them in there and let them fight to the death, and they would then utilize whatever sort of perils they could put them in with. Obviously the room that the Lord Chancellor has found access to is almost a control center for the Death Zone. Is the way I get it.
So you think he was in control of the firebolts?
So that's what I'm saying, is that they talk about how dangerous and deadly this could have been. And when they get there, they really don't have as much problem, because do you notice, you're right, when the Master hones in on, he has a homing beacon in that thing that he's, and so that the Lord Chancellor knows where he's, was it Barusa? Is that what it was?
Barusa.
Barusa knows...
although technically he's President Barusa,
Yeah.
not Chancellor. But,
No, I'm sorry, yes, because she's Chancellor.
yes. Chancellor Flavia.
Flavia.
You have to say it like Anthony Ainley.
President-
Chancellor Flavia. Just because he's got that.
The flair.
Spirit
President
fingers.
Barusa knows where the Master is, so that almost explains why the bolts show up where the Master is, because the President is essentially trying to take out the Doctor. That's why he has brought the Doctor and his other selves there, to kind of play a game with them and ultimately destroy the Doctor, get him out of the way.
Right.
With the exception of the 5th incarnation, which he then believes that he needs. But
But wouldn't destroying the other versions of the Doctor destroy the Doctor?
That is a question that I've always wondered about. When Anthony Anley has them at disruptor point at the end of the thing, how gratifying to do it 3 times over. And even as a kid watching this, I thought to myself, you'd have to kill Pertwee first. Because I'm still working under Back to the Future logic. If you killed the first Doctor, the other 2 would cease to be.
No, you're missing a key point.
Yes, I understand.
You're missing a key point, and it's heavily said throughout this. They've all been taken out of time.
Yeah.
So while you are in the death zone, anything can happen to any one of you and not affect anybody else.
Right.
Which is why they touch.
It's not until that is my explanation for the Blinovich limitation effect. Is while you're within the death zone and you've been taken out of time, it doesn't matter if you touch each other because you're all kind of existing in this temporal plane anyway.
Right.
So the same thing with if you killed them. If you killed one of them, it's not until you return to your proper time that it would have an effect because you're not returned to your timeline until that point. So, I'm sorry. There's not a lot wrong with this story.
No,
it's
there's not a lot of
fantastic.
things you can pick apart about this.
Like I said,
One I will own.
If I want to be really, really nitpicky, it saddens me that Barusa winds up being the bad guy. Because
Well, it's a little easy.
Well, it's a little easy, but it's also, and this is coming from, you're kind of lost on this perspective because you haven't seen Invasion of Time. Barusa's in that one.
Oh.
And
It's a different actor, but
that's why they make the comment, your regeneration has not improved your stubbornness. But Barusa is a character who, previously, you've come to like and respect, and he's a genuine ally of the Doctor. And they talk about old times, and Barusa taught him at the Academy, and he was an instructor, and he's somebody that the Doctor looks up to. Now, it totally works when Davison gets that moment in the control room and realizes that it's Barusa, and he's just so pained about it.
yes, that's
what
that's
happened
another
to you,
thing.
Barusa.
You say it's bad, it's sad, but
Well,
it's
it's
sad, but it works so well.
It is
because
sad
it's-
from the
Knowing that background, that makes me like the story even more.
Well, no,
Yeah.
I do like it. I'm not saying that it's wrong
It works
because
so well.
it does. It works so well, but I feel bad because
You were set up to like this.
I
guy
liked
a lot.
Barusa,
And then you're torn
exactly.
down. Yeah.
I didn't, and I don't want to throw a Star Trek reference out there, but
They did a Harry Potter with it?
no, we're not even going to go into that direction. The original.
Oh no.
The original planning for Star Trek VI would have been that Saavik was the villain who
Yes.
turned, and Gene Roddenberry stepped in and said, "No, she's reached favored nation status as a character. You can't turn her into a bad guy." And I wavered on that for a long time because I think, as a writer, that holds so much more weight if you can take a character that we do like and turn them into something that we don't.
That's very.
I appreciate that, and I
That's
really
good
like it.
storytelling,
As a
because
fan,
You set things on its head.
as a fan of Barusa, I was like, "Oh man, really?" And like I said, it's a complete nitpicky thing. I agree with you. There's really nothing wrong with this.
I have to say,
episode.
I have to find the stuff about Rassilon interesting.
Let's talk about Rassilon.
I want to address something that you brought up because you threw out the Harry Potter, and I think that your reasoning is slightly wrong. I see where you're going with it, but Snape was good from the beginning.
Well,
From the beginning of the books, anyway.
yeah.
Because
I guess not having
they
seen
pull the
Invasion
wool
of-
out. They pull the wool over your eyes because they do that little switcheroo where you think he's bad at 6. You think, oh, you've set me up for the longest time.
he's
He's
been
this
good the
good
entire
guy,
time, yeah.
and then you totally pull a oh no, he really is the bad guy on me. But she turns around and he's not. There's a reason for that, and so I
Yeah.
don't think that works in this way because Barusa goes to his grave
Well, yeah.
having turned entirely 180
technically,
degrees.
he's still living.
Well, yes, he is immortal.
That is right. He is immortal.
So
Go
how
ahead.
do you?
We'll
how
talk
do you,
about
How do you think that's a interesting question with the immortality when they're trapped in the which I thought very simple, but I thought was really cool.
Oh, yeah,
when
I
they're
think so,
trapped
too.
in the sarcophagus and just the eyes are the only thing moving, but then they revert back to stone. So is it their consciousness still active? Is that the curse of the immortality? is that you can think about this for all of eternity. Because obviously, if you're stoned,
Perhaps, yeah. No,
that's
I think
not really a punishment. It's just you get to wake up every couple of centuries when some other idiot decides to join the peanut gallery.
the ring of Rassilon. There's the other thing that this falls down on.
And then the doctor's reaction
The tomb of Rassilon.
well, do you guys want immortality? Oh, no, that's great, thanks.
Yeah,
was
that was a neat
fantastic.
reaction. I love that. Are we going to talk about the of Rassilon pieces? Because we're making quite a long list now. And of
There
all my
is a
years of watching
long-
Doctor Who, I never, ever, ever noticed how many of Rassilons there
Soon
are.
we're going to become just the Of Rassilon podcast, not Traveling the Vortex.
Because we've got the staff of Rassilon, we've got the sash of Rassilon, we've got the, what did we decide? The key of Rassilon. We have the ring of
tomb.
Rassilon, the tomb of Rassilon. We have
The game of
game
Rassilon.
Rassilon. We have, oh my gosh.
The harp of Rassilon.
Yes, the harp. How can we forget the harp of Rassilon?
It only played a minor.
Oh!
I've been waiting all night for that one. that goes out for you, Phil. Little music joke there.
So, how many of Rassilons are there? I'm going to start. I say this, and we've already gone through 2 episodes since I've done it. But I want to sit down and make a list of everything that is of Rassilon in Gallifreyan lore or.
Well, we're forgetting the one from the Deadly Assassin. The
Weren't there 3 items? There was a staff, a sash, and
the key.
No, the key is not from that.
Oh, the key
The
is,
key
the
is
key is
later,
from
yeah,
Invasion, isn't it? Invasion of Time.
Yes, yes.
I found the list
There is a list.
on Wikipedia.
Oh, thank you, Wikipedia. Read it
The
off to you.
sash of Rassilon.
Sash.
The crown of Rassilon.
Crown.
Or coronet.
The coronet. That's
As
probably
he
on there
called it.
differently, though. Yeah. Go
It
ahead.
is.
Yeah.
The
Oh,
key
really?
of Rassilon. The rod of Rassilon.
Rod. That's what I'm thinking, not staff. It's the rod of Rassilon. It's the rod and and the sash is in the
Yeah.
Deadly Assassin.
Well, there's another. The
The coronet of Rassilon. The harp of Rassilon. The ring of Rassilon. The black scrolls.
The Black Scrolls of
Black
Rassilon.
Rassilon.
Yes.
That's it.
The seal of Rassilon. I
Oh, the
remember
tomb of
mentioning
Rassilon, the seal of Rassilon. Yeah, they're
Yeah, the tomb or tower of Rassilon.
that. And the game. Because they said that.
there's a lot more than Wikipedia's got. Because
Yeah, the game of Rassilon.
In Deadly Assassin, once the Master had the sash and the rod of Rassilon, and he went after the controls for the
What was the Eye of Harmony?
Eye of Harmony.
Yeah.
And the big pillar rises up out of the floor. That was the something of Rassilon, I
Was
thought.
it? Okay.
I thought for
couldn't
sure it
remember.
was.
I thought there were 3 elements there as well. But remembering that,
The crown,
thinking that the key is later.
the
Because,
key is later.
For, as you said, Invasion of Time.
Yeah, there's a lot of Rassilon.
Of course, we also have a lot of
Wait,
Orion.
it's
as
not
well,
the game
so.
of Rassilon, because Rassilon put a stop to the games.
No, the
Well-
second Doctor, Troughton, when he's talking to the Brig, he actually mentions we could be playing the game of Rassilon right now, which I presume means that it's just a generic term for...
That's it. I'm glad
because
you brought that up.
everything
Because-
else was of
No.
Rassilon.
I think
From
no.
what I remember, this says.
I'm
and
gonna-
I thought I remember this.
I'm
too.
going to temper what I'm saying here because we're going to revisit something later. I've got to be very careful. But there is something that Troughton really made me think about when he talks about this time, is that for so long we hold Rassilon in such high esteem. We hold Rassilon as the founder of the Time Lords, of Time Lord Society, the original ruler, the man who, with Omega, or Omega, for our British listeners, the man who with Omega, or the Time Lord with Omega, who harnessed the power of the black hole and basically essentially made time travel possible. This is the man that set up the Time Lord Society. This is the man who sets everything in motion. This is the man who's revered and everything's named after. However,
The turnpike of Rassilon.
however, there's also hinted
the soup of Rassilon.
There's also hinted a dark side to Rassilon, that perhaps he's not the man or Time Lord that everyone has set up him to be. That maybe he was actually,
A despot.
a despot. Maybe he is the first person that used the Death Zone for the games of Rassilon, where they say he stepped in and put a stop to it, but maybe there was this dark side. And
Which-
maybe there's not as much about Rassilon that we think we know,
That's
or the
possible.
Time Lords at this point in their history know of Rassilon because it's been so much removed.
Well, and the Brig makes that comment. I thought you said he was rather a good chap, and
Yes.
Troughton responds with, "So the official history
Yes,
says."
and it was little
that's-
things that were
yeah.
dropped in this that will make something much later work for me. So that's all I can say.
But there are.
I say much later. It's not much.
It's also it's kind of always bothered
Well,
me that if
depending on if you talk our timeline or real world timeline.
it's also always bothered me that if Rassilon is such a good guy, and then he says, "Well, he stepped in and put a stop to this eventually."
Eventually, yeah.
Was he just busy?
Well,
I mean,
he was-
did he?
He was busy harnessing the time of
Well, yeah, I mean,
time travel. I mean,
he's obviously got some demands on his regenerations here. But
He's out farming black holes.
Yeah.
He's a busy man.
is it
he's dealing with Omega, and that's an egotist.
because the Death Zone and the games are such mythical status? I mean, they've descended into legend to the point where, I mean, Barusa wasn't even sure that it all existed when he began the quest
Yes,
to find
right.
immortality.
Ironically enough, the control room for that is opened by the harp of Rassilon, who obviously owned the harp before anybody else did. Sorry.
Didn't know it was musical, or he was musical. But you know, it just seems.
Multifaceted guy.
Is the game really a like black market kind of thing? Is it that it was a very
secret, a
was
dirty
it,
secret.
Was it the
It's
Time Lord
underground.
Fight Club?
Yes,
Was it?
there you go. Was it an underground?
Everybody knew about it, but nobody talked about it.
The first rule of the Death Zone is you do not talk about the Death Zone.
That, yeah. It's a nice thing about this story is it incites a lot of discussion, a lot of possibilities and it's probably because this is probably the single Doctor Who that I have seen the most because I will frequently
Agreed.
watch this because I love it so much, and I think that this is the reason why it incites so much discussion is because the more I watch, the more things I pick up on it, the more things I can garner out of it, and maybe even the more things that I
more
personally start to.
inconsistencies you
Well,
find,
I start to
the more-
retcon. No, because
Oh.
I don't find
You
the
retcon it.
inconsistencies. This actually fixes a lot of things that I think are inconsistent, and they seem to this I can seem to go back to a lot of times and say this works. This makes other things work, and I can reference this story
A reference
to make
point,
things
yeah.
work. Yeah.
This really is a nexus point for the entire Doctor Who continuum.
I think
Oh,
it
yeah.
is.
It is
I
such
think
an
this
important
is-
one.
a must-own and a must-see for any Doctor Who fan.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
I'm so glad I've seen this now. And,
I'm always hesitant to introduce people to Doctor Who with this, and the reason
well,
being,
it's not a good introduction.
that's right. The reason
No,
being
no.
is because there is a lot of fan wink in here. There is a lot of you wouldn't know that the Yeti was a
Oh, yeah.
being or it was a creature that the
Even though
Doctor
I-
and the Brig had been encountered twice before. You wouldn't.
Oh, it was
Excuse me.
Slice?
You wouldn't. Yeah. You wouldn't. You wouldn't. Realize a lot of the things about this, or wouldn't appreciate as many of the things about it if you don't have some background in Doctor Who.
Oh, yeah.
Although it still I think it still sort of stands alone as a story.
There's a lot of nice
Somewhat.
referential.
As much as any most classic Doctor Who does.
Yeah.
But
There are. Is it sad for me to admit that this is the only Yeti story of Doctor Who I've seen?
I've only listened to because I believe one of them doesn't exist anymore, and the other one exists in most parts, but like two,
But not all of it.
And I've actually listened to an audio of that because as I talked about, they have a lot of
Yeah.
the existing audio is still there, and so I like to listen to ones that are missing. I like to listen to the whole thing because they do such a good job of linking it with narration.
I would like to talk briefly on the special edition of the Five
No,
Doctors,
absolutely. I think we should.
which we introduced Keith. We sat down, we watched the special edition. Our reasoning for that was you I think correctly surmised that because the special edition has been issued more frequently than the original broadcast version. I almost said theatrical. that there were twice as many opportunities for people to have purchased the special edition, and so if we're going to watch it and have people have the opportunity to watch along with Friday Night Who, we need to let them know which one we're watching. So we chose the special edition, which I think also kind of fits in a little bit better with since
New series.
with new series, and since there is so much of what we have watched on DVD that has been tweaked, that it lends itself to that. Now, having said that, I appreciate the changes they made. I'm really, really, really torn. I like the effect, and I know I said, nah, it's not the same. And I don't want to give the impression. I do like the effect of the time
tissue paper?
scoop.
Yes.
The vortex coming down and snagging them and swirling them away. I miss the Phantom Zone flat, two-dimensional trapezoid black triangle. I know it's silly. I know it's a horrible effect, even by 1983 standards. But there's just something that was so... Maybe because I've seen this so many times, and that's ingrained into me as to what that was. When I first sat down and watched the special edition and that vortex showed up, I was like, what? I mean, it threw me, and it threw me hard. And I hate to do it, but again, the only thing I can like it to is the director's cut of Star Trek The Motion Picture, which is another one I've seen over and over and over again. The director's cut comes out, and they've made substantial changes to it, including the ship alarm, which sounds a lot like it does on the original series. It's got the high-pitched, and for years, it has always been the kind of, big bass tone noise, which I always thought was cool. It's part of the new ship. It's a new
Right. It's a new ship.
It's a new ship.
We're set up with that at the very beginning.
They changed a lot of things. And this, they kind of go back, and it makes it much more historically in line with what would come later and what has come before, so it fits better, and it makes sense for the reasons they changed it. But I still missed it. There were a lot of things that changed. And this is kind of definitely one of those that the changes that they made, again, I can appreciate them for what they were, and I like them, but I really miss that.
You really missed the small, thin, green missile command effects on the power
checkerboard.
grid.
I did miss the checkerboard. I thought the lightning effect was much
better.
Much better
in that one. And I feel justified with the time scoop, because there's an Eighth Doctor audio adventure where it gets used, and they describe it as a black trapezoidal hole that's rushing toward them, and because that was done before the special edition came out.
Yeah.
And when I heard that, my ears perked up instantly. I knew exactly what it was. I was like, "Oh, this is going to be bad." And
and
we showed him to Keith, and he was very much not impressed with the
with
original.
the originals, I was
effects.
not impressed. I really,
But he saw the new before he saw the
That's
original,
true.
so.
I wasn't that impressed with the new either.
Aww.
But considering the time frame that it's in, it's acceptable.
Yeah.
I mean, you can only do so much with so much technology.
What did you think of the switch on the Tom Baker segment from Shada?
I like it.
I was
like
going
it.
to mention that it was nice to, at least since we
It's
don't get to see Shada,
yeah.
it was so nice to see something from Shada.
Yeah. I like the fact that I think I like the change, the fact that they're back on the boat.
Dropped
It
off
makes
where
sense.
they were,
Dropped
as
off
opposed
where
to
they were,
somewhere
and
else.
almost maybe not even remembering
That it happened.
that it even happened. That maybe it was just this blip. But I do just visually the scene where he's lying on the ground and he gets up and runs into the TARDIS as Romana said. Visually, that's just such more. There's more energy to it. It's almost like he's there's a reason why he's laying on the ground there, because he's been dropped off. But it's
much more Tom
jarringly
Baker.
out of, yeah, it is. But it's jarringly out of place now that I've seen the special edition so much. So when we went back the other night and watched it, I went, oh, I forgot. Even the clip of him in the image when he's caught in the vortex, it's a shot of him and Romana. too.
Yeah.
And by having it that kind of wavy, not quite all one piece in the special edition, and kind of pixelated a bit, and having him on the boat in perspective of where he was picked up from makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
And it works a lot better. I like opening the show with the different shots of the Dark Tower, setting it up, kind of solace and solemn as we work our way into it before we get into the nuts and bolts of the story. I think that was a nice addition. It doesn't abruptly get right into the Doctor and Tegan and Turlough on Where were they at? They were. At,
I guess I didn't realize that was
I have,
too much of addition.
I have Harmony. What?
No, it was the Eye of Orion, I think.
I have Orion.
Yeah. Because you said, "Oh, it's not the."
Oh, you're right. You're right. I did.
So that's a neat change. I like the lightning effect better in the death zone when they're outdoors.
Oh yeah,
it's so much better than the little missile command green.
Oh wow!
I do
those were bad,
which
in
I
the
didn't
original
notice until you
broadcast.
pointed it out. I do like the fact that the Cybermen get some shots off. It does
Yeah.
make them a little more have a credible ally.
Thankfully,
Don't you wish there are times though that if we can go back and tweak this and this, why can't you go and update the graphic on any computer screen in Doctor Who? Because it's always
I thought of
the
the same
very
thing, yeah.
basic, less than
8-bit
Pac-Man.
graphic. Yeah, it's,
You know,
Oh, yeah.
It's the 8-bit.
I mean-
Actually, it's more of the what was
what?
Atari 6-bit,
4-bit.
4-bit.
4-bit,
I mean, it's
2 bits, 4
very
bits, 6
Atari.
bits a piece.
Some of them are.
That's
very
what the
Atari.
graphics look like in the episodes. 4 bits.
And every time, I mean, we're in a time machine. It's bigger on the inside. It can move, blah blah blah. And then he fires up the monitor, and it's like, oh.
Yeah,
and what's sad is at the time, I'm sure that
was
one,
high tech scientific. That was cool.
Oh
stuff.
yeah.
that one graphic probably took somebody 4 weeks to construct for that one panel and that one shot. But
And some 6-year-old kid's making them on his computer at
Yeah.
home right today,
Yeah.
in 5 minutes Hey,
With
look what I
MS
did.
Paint,
Yeah,
because that's what the lightning looked like to me in the original version. The broadcast version was somebody drew a line with MS Paint, and even the bolts when they're with the master. That's in the original.
Yeah.
It was the same green lines.
yeah.
It,
They just don't have the little.
and they
spikies.
didn't
Yeah.
even, they didn't even move. Like
Yeah.
there
It was
was
just-
no
No, they
motion.
just
showed up.
flashed in.
It
yeah.
just was
yeah.
me.
and bounced around like that. And then they had the little.
I think I did similar stuff in high school in my computer class.
So, is there anything else we should cover on this before we finish? There's so much good about this, and from the acting to the story.
Despite
to
we've
the,
critiqued this episode a lot, we did love this
we
episode.
did. I
Oh,
don't
yeah.
think we
all
critiqued
three
it
of
at all.
us.
I think we pointed out much more highlights of this than we did negatives of this story.
I suppose the ending. We should talk very, very briefly just about the as Chrissy pointed out, and how symmetrical it is. That you're just going to run off and you know,
Oh,
you're not
yeah.
going to become president of Gallifrey. You're just going
Which
to leave your people and run
Tom
off in a
Baker
rickety old
did.
TARDIS.
Oh, how it comes full circle.
Yeah.
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 Why
I
not?
like
That's
that.
how it began.
Yeah,
I mean,
love that. That was neat. That was a nice way to end a 20th anniversary.
Oh yeah,
and even starting
harkening
it,
back to the beginning.
even starting it with the line from
Invasion, Earth.
Dalek Invasion Earth.
which was a very cool scene, and
Mm-hmm.
technically allows it to be the 5 Doctors.
It does.
It
And
does.
that was part of the inclusion of having that scene from Hartnell was the
to-
idea to have the original First Doctor be in this in some way,
Yeah.
even though it's sort of taken out of context. Although it's not, because I mean it's just it's
A
it's a
generic
scene
line.
that he had said at some day,
Yeah.
you know, and
which was referring to
we
Susan,
just
if I
happened to get
remember
yes,
correctly.
we just happened to get to see.
and we
what
get
he
to
is.
see Susan come back,
That's
so
right,
and
yeah.
it works.
No, only good things for this one. Like I said, it's one that I've seen over and over and over again, and will continue to watch over and over and over again because it's just that good.
It is,
Absolutely.
and Keith will own.
And
I
Keith
will
Lauren.
own
So-
once I move out on my own again.
Well, that's going to do it
Why
for
do you
this
keep
week.
talking about moving out? You just got in, and you're
I'm just planning for the future.
Let's focus. What are we
the
doing? next
moving
week?
van of Rassilon will not allow you to move out.
What are we doing next week, Sean?
Next week's Friday Night Who, the 2 Doctors, Patrick Troughton and Colin Baker. So this will only be our second experience with the 6th Doctor.
Yeah.
Hour?
My.
Keith's.
As
You've
a
had more
as a show.
As a
As a
show,
show.
As a show,
Yes.
our second introduction
I'll
to
give you
Colin
that.
Baker. So we need to tweet him and see if we can get him on board for.
Hey, I would absolutely love
Skype
it.
him in.
He'd tweet along. So
Yeah, we should do that. And then our show next week.
Perry's in that too, so we could get Nicola Bryan.
We could get Nicole Bryan. Our show next
Is
week.
Fraser Hines still on Twitter? We could,
Is he on Twitter? I didn't know he was on
I
Twitter.
think he is. Yeah,
I want to say
love to see.
I need to start following him if he's not. Or if he is. I couldn't follow him if he's not on Twitter.
Well, you could, but it'd be really creepy.
Yeah, if you followed him, he's not on Twitter. That would be considered stalking.
I never prosecuted. So next week we've got. We'll go back and review the three doctors.
Two doctors.
The two doctors. And Time Crash. And that will finish out our multi-doctor story. Although, now, did we decide for sure on...
I think we'll Dimensions is so short. We're
going to throw it in now?
Yeah, we'll throw it in.
Well, we will also review Dimensions in Time, which is the...
It's a multi-doctor story.
It is a multi-doctor story.
It's the only other multi-doctor story aired. And it has all of the doctors.
Oh, it aired?
All of them, yeah. It has all of the doctors.
All right,
in a very way that we talked about how we wouldn't like to see happen for the 50th.
We'll
talk about it.
We'll get to it.
Yeah.
We even have 3D glasses.
The disembodied head of two of them, I guess I should say. No, because the print we've got, I don't think is in 3D.
Really?
Yeah, I think when it was recorded, it was.
It flashed. Put your goggles on now, man.
It did, and it's.
And there's a logo in the corner and everything.
Yes, but there's. I think when whoever.
I'm teasing.
Snapped it off the TV, did the little polarize one side so that you don't get both images that would create the 3D.
You're implying that we don't have an official copy.
We do not have an official copy. I don't think anybody does.
No.
Yeah.
An official copy doesn't exist.
Well, it was never to be aired again. That was the distinct... well, we'll talk about that one.
We'll talk more about the insanity of John Nathan Turner next week.
Yes.
So there's your homework assignment. You should have already watched The Three Doctors with us. If not, go back and do it, which Mel didn't get to join in.
It's on Netflix.
We were in Omaha, and so she's been going back and watching. I'll in a heartbeat, I'll sit down and watch The Three Doctors again.
Oh, hell.
So,
she wants to come over, I'll watch it with her.
Because I wasn't there that week either, so I still
that's
haven't
true.
rewatched
You were busy.
it. Yeah. No, I've seen it recently.
But you know what's funny is I should probably say this, but the first thing comes up, and the cliffhanger is the Doctor and Joe getting zapped by the antimatter monster, and she's like, "Oh!" I mean, she was genuinely concerned. So then we had to leave, so we didn't get to finish. So we came back. And I was like, "Well, let's watch the next part." So we watched the next segment, and Unit Headquarters get zapped and thrown into the black hole. And she's like, "Oh!" So she's really getting this cliffhanger style because there's been a couple of days between each segment of this thing, which has been great. But so the Three Doctors, then we'll do the Two Doctors. Join us next week for Friday Night Who, and then Time Crash, which you must, and I will. We'll talk about it. I will take umbrage and offense at anybody who says it's not canon, because it is. And then Dimensions in Time, which is not, but we're going to talk about it anyway. Anything else?
I don't think so. That's going to do it for us this week. Until next time, I'm Glenn. It's you. Of Rassilon.
I'm Shaun of Rassilon.
I'm Keith of Rassilon.
I didn't get the reference, sorry.
I'm just staring blankly at him going, "You're not done yet."
Be seeing you.
Good night, everybody of Rassilon.
Cheers! Of Rassilon.
You have been listening to Traveling the Vortex. Doctor Who and all of its associated programs are owned and trademarked by the BBC. No infringement is intended or implied.